Hello, everybody. My name is Raj Dabre from NICT Japan, and along with my co-author Anirav Suku from the University of Mauritius, I'm happy to present our work KreolMorisienMT, a dataset for Mauritian Creole Machine Translation. This work will be presented at AACL-IJCNLP as a findings paper. First, I'll give an overview of our work. We prepared the first publicly available benchmark for Mauritian Creole machine translation, where we focus on the English Mauritian Creole and French Mauritian Creole pairs. We prepared parallel and monolingual data from diverse sources. There are existing sources such as Bible and storybook translations. And then we also created parallel corpora for daily expressions and conversations. We leverage transfer learning by fine-tuning English-French models as well as embarked models to get high translation quality for our translation directions. We also performed human evaluations where the human rating showed that our best models appear to have perfect translations for about half the sentences. Our data and models are publicly released at this URL. So what is Mauritian Creole? Mauritian Creole is also known as Kreol Morisien. It is a language which is spoken in Mauritius and Rodrigues Islands, and a variant is also spoken in the Seychelles. French remained as a dominant language in Mauritian Creole because it was colonized by French people. Before that, it was colonized by Dutch people. Nevertheless, the influence of French remained pretty high, and that French influence eventually had its impact on Creole Morisien. Creole Morisian also has many similarities with English. In this table, you will see certain words between French, Creole Morisian, and English, which are translations of each other. You can see the French word avion as pretty much the same as it is in Mauritian Creole, and its translation in English is airplane. Similarly, we have gas, which is written similarly in French as well as Creole Mauritian. There are certain cases where you have something like anger in English, which is written a bit slightly different in French and Creole Mauritian, but the French and Creole Mauritian words seem to be similar to each other. With regards to Creole Mauritian grammar, there are three main points to be noted. First is that the adjective placement is the same as French. So if you have the English sentence, the brown bird, the French translation and the Creole translation both have the word marron, which is brown, coming after the noun, which is the bird. So in French, oiseau and oiseau, pardon my pronunciation, they are the nouns, and marron, which is the adjective, it comes after the noun. Whereas in English, the word brown comes before the noun. With regards to singular plural forms, in English, you can notice that the word birds has an S at the end of it. In Creole, however, there is no such change. So in other words, the word oiseau, which is bird in the first example, it has not changed. It remains the same. There is no S ending at it. Finally, there is verb dropping, where in English you have the word sentence he is bad, and in Mauritian Creole it is li move, but li over here means he and move means bad. The verb is dropped. So you can see that there are certain similarities, orthographic similarities as well as dissimilarities, as well as grammatical similarities and dissimilarities between English, French, and Mauritian Creole. We created the KreolMorisienMT benchmark, which consists of a trilingual development and test set, where we have 500 development sentences and 1,000 test sentences. And we intentionally chose to have longer sentences where the average length is about from 16 to 18 tokens. The English to Creole training set consists of 21,810 pairs, of which 12,467 are dictionary entries, and the average length is around 6 tokens. The French Creole training set consists of 16,739 pairs, of which 12,424 are dictionary entries. And the average length over here is even shorter at 2 tokens. Note that the dictionary entries lead to the average length being smaller. In, However, there are several sentences which contain more than 10 tokens on average. We also have some monolingual Creole data, which was not used in this work. However, we have about 45,364 sentences, where the average length is around 16 tokens. As for the distribution of the data, I've mentioned it before, but just to clarify, it comes from the Bible, storybooks, around 1,500 daily expressions, and also dictionary entries. In our experiments, we trained unidirectional as well as multilingual models, where the multilingual models were bidirectional models, and we compared models trained from scratch as well as models that were fine-tuned. When fine-tuning, we had our own pre-trained model trained using English and French, where we considered 2 million parallel sentences taken from the UN corpora. We also considered the MBART50 model, where we considered both of its variants. One is the denoising variant, which is trained only on monolingual data, and one, the M2M variant, which is the denoising model fine-tuned on multilingual parallel corpora. For our implementation, we use the YANMTT toolkit, and for evaluation, we use Saclabrew. Now let's look at the results. First, look at the table on the first rows, which shows unidirectional and multilingual models, which do not use any pre-training. You can see that the unidirectional models, they do not perform that very well, especially for Creole French translation. For Creole English and English Creole, there is some decent translation quality. However, when you go from unidirectional to multilingual training, you see that the translation quality actually improves by several blue points, which shows that even without pre-training, multilingual training is a very strong solution. Now, let's go to the next block where we see what happens when we fine-tune our pre-trained French-English bidirectional models. And here you can see that there is a massive impact on the translation quality. The blue scores jump from 11.1 for Creole English all the way to 22.9. In this situation, you can see that multilingual training does not seem to have a large impact on Creole English or English Creole translation, but it does have a reasonable impact on Creole French and French Creole translation. Moving on to the next two blocks, where we use the MBART denoising and the MBART T many-to-many models, indicated by MBD and MBT respectively. You can see that MBART denoising models also improve over no pre-training scenarios, but they are slightly weaker than those used than when we use the French English pre-training models, which are actually trained for machine translation. Here you can see, however, that multilingual models do have an edge over unidirectional models. Finally, in the final block where we fine-tune the MBART M2M models or the MBT translation models, you can see that we get the best results compared to the baselines, where the multilingual training yields the best possible models, giving blue scores from around 20 for Creole to French translation all the way to 24.9 for Creole to English translation. This shows that even if the MBART model does not contain Creole vocabulary, it can still do a very good job for Creole English and Creole French translation. We also performed human evaluation, where the native Creole speaker was asked to evaluate 50 sentences for each translation direction. And we asked them to do ratings on adequacy and fluency. And according to them, if you look at the table, about half of the translations seem to be perfect. If you look at the adequacy fluency scores, you see that most of the scores are above 3, which indicates that the translations are pretty much at a high quality. This also shows that it is very important to use any kind of pre-trained model, whether it be done using denoising or using the machine translation object or by using machine translation. If you look at some examples, the table below gives an example of translation from Mauritian Creole to English, where you can see how the fine tuning improves the translation quality. The baseline makes a mistake when translating grabbing the servants and instead translates it as agreed on those servants, whereas the fine-tuned model manages to capture this more or less correctly. In conclusion, we have created the first public Mauritian Creole machine translation benchmark, and we have released the dataset and models publicly. This benchmark, this dataset belongs to the general domain. We have created strong baselines using multilingualism and transfer learning. There are some limitations where our training corpus consists of Bible translations, which might not always be useful in a practical situation. We have also not used the Creole monolingual data that we have created, and getting additional monolingual data is also quite difficult due to its scarcity. We tried to look on the internet, but we could find very few sources of Creole monolingual data. Therefore, in the future, we want to increase our efforts towards searching for Creole monolingual data. We also want to create data sets for other natural language generation tasks like summarization and headline generation. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.